Hey yo party peeps, we are back with another Diablo video, and today I have a few questions for you. Are you tired of the exact same cookie cutter optimized builds you've seen everywhere else on YouTube? Would you rather play as the ultimate meme lord rather than another Skywalker-esque hero? Are you basically fed up with winning the way that the game developer intended? Well, I have the video for you. Today we are going to be looking at a collection of class builds that definitely should not work on paper, but somehow kinda do. And on top of that, they're way more fun than the hyper-optimized trash that you're probably playing now. If you're just here for the crunch, all of the point attributions are going to be down there in the description, right next to the timestamps. But make sure to like and subscribe, or my next video will literally just be all math. With that out of the way, let's get into it with the Barbarian. If you're like me and think that running towards your enemy and swinging your weapon is already way too much effort to spend for 60 levels, well, I have a solution for you. No longer burdened with the taxing task of thinking, attacking, or moving really at all, this build, which I'm calling the THORNY build, will make playing Diablo easier than ever. By emphasizing thorns and max health, you avoid your enemies interrupting your AFK time for when you go off to make a sandwich or whatever you're doing. By focusing on an overpowered Flay as your core skill and mixing in a variety of shouts, you can actually push this build to having a total of 4 buttons if you're feeling really ambitious. But those do just make it better. They're not even necessary. Instead, we're just gonna load up on a bunch of passive buffs and focus on health, thorns, and fortification throughout the skill tree. Not only does this deal an insane amount of damage, but with most swarms, you actually end up with more health coming out of them than you did going in. While it's great against mobs, I was also able to take on big story bosses, swarms of elites, and a lot of other challenging scenarios without even having to attack. When I did attack, your basic is almost entirely maxed out, so you're just feeding directly into your thorns, bleed, and creating health to the point where everything up to elites is pretty much a one-hitter quitter as you do a drive-by swipe on your way to whatever victory you want to claim. So, final grading for fun factor, this is going to be a 1 or a 5, I guess, depending on how distracted you are at the time, but for me, it's a solid 3. There's a lot of fun to be had in running through huge crowds of enemies and accidentally killing everyone. For ease of use, gotta be a solid 5 out of 5. You will never play a Diablo class easier than this one. And as far as effectiveness, honestly, this has got to be another 5. Other than the rarest of occasions where I had to pop a health potion or deal with a lot of area of effect damage, this build never really struggled to produce end results. So overall, I'm going to give the THORNY build a solid 4 out of 5. But if you disagree, then leave a comment, you coward. And next up, we have the Druid. While I think what they've done with the Druid in Diablo 4 is really cool and the shape-shifting vibe is super dope from what I've been able to play thus far, I gotta be honest, they're really awful. I tried a ton of different things to make a werebear or a werewolf build super fun and effective, and ultimately you kind of end up with one or the other from a lot of the stuff that I've been able to explore. So in addition to memeing it up in a big way and providing an effective build for the Druid, we're also going to lean into the elemental aspects of the class in what I'm calling the FRAG-NAROK build. You're going to absolutely melt mobs, deal big damage against single elite targets, and call upon the storm to become the ultimate god of lightning. Dealing some of the highest AoE damage I saw out of any of the builds early game, this build also has the added benefits of crowd control, huge vulnerability procs, and a level of flexibility that makes it easy to fine-tune for different scenarios. In essence, the build uses Storm Strike up close to generate spirit and proc vulnerables, but the real center gem of this build is going to be the Lightning Storm. I had this nearly maxed out with some minimalist spirit gen buffs early on, and it deals a lot of damage if you play around it. We then add the Cyclone armor to add more CC and vulnerabilities, and in the next tier, Nature's Reach bumps our damage on targets at range, which you basically can hit from anywhere. After that, it's just an absolute full-on, no-quit all through your storm passes before picking up the first ult on this list with Cataclysm. When put together in this way, all you do is run into a group of enemies, start a cyclone to blow them all back and make them vulnerable, and then laugh with pseudo-maniacal laughter, or whichever brand of laughter you prefer, as you melt them to the ground with a massive lightning storm. Pairing this sequence with the ult is definitely a damage magnifier, but beyond that, it just looks absolutely badass. If we're making meme builds, how it looks has to be worth at least 70% of its value, so good rankings for that alone. So to try and score the God of FRAG-NAROK, I'm gonna give the fun factor a solid 3. You get to call down lightning, and if you find a piece of equipment that gives you a free rank in wolves, well, you get to live out your cheap budget cosplay fantasy if you pretend that they're goats. The effective damage loop can get a little stale, but in that sense, it's really no worse than any other of the optimized builds you're probably playing anyway. For ease of use, this one is a solid 2. Not in that learning the combat loop or damage cycle is particularly difficult, but starting the spirit generation engine up again if you get thrown off can be a problem. And lastly, for effectiveness, I'm also going to say that this is a 3. There wasn't a mob or a boss that I couldn't handle with this approach, but as I've mentioned, having to restart the spirit engine when you're in a less than ideal position can add some additional challenges. For the overall score, I'm going to say this one comes in just a little bit light with a 2 out of 5. Even with that being the case, if you ever find yourself outnumbered and walled in, you can make sure to remind your foes that I'm not locked in here with you.
You're locked in here with me!
Next up, we have a Necromancer build that allows you to maintain a sense of realism when you play Diablo because you won't have any friends. In what I'm calling the all by myself build, we flip the script on the conventional Necromancer play by making no use of summons whatsoever in exchange for becoming an invincible fortifying machine. You know how they say if you want something done, do it yourself? Well, this build basically puts the righteous indignation into the forefront by turning the Necromancer into a tank. When it comes to skills, the build relies heavily on hemorrhage for essence generation and focuses around blood surge as the core AoE mechanic. Because even the tankiest Necromancer isn't going to have the endless hit points of a barbarian, we also incorporate a heavy investment into bone prison to both pin down big bads and apply vulnerables to anything that happens to get caught in the bone zone.
Stop it. Get some help.
From there, we skip out on curses entirely to focus on additional Fortify and Thorns passive since you're going to be right in the thick of it the whole time. We'll cap it off with Coalesced Blood because it sounds both badass and boosts all of the damage that we're going to be dealing, and with that, you can let the dead rest. Leave Skeletor and the Bony Boys to handle their own thing, and you can finally get off your ass and do something for once. So for final grading on the all by myself build, for fun factor, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. Playing a Necromancer that feels like a tank and charging in like Jon Snow knowing you have the power of blood magic behind you is pretty dope. Plus your AoE attack makes it look like your enemies explode, so bonus points. For ease of use though, this is going to drop to a 2 out of 5. It requires a great deal more essence than your typical Necromancer build is going to, and now you also don't have those minions covering for when you panic ult like an idiot. For effectiveness, I'm going to say that this one is also a 3 out of 5 because once you get the hang of the core rhythm, it's generally easy to manage but does require you to focus on doing so. Even when you're fighting big bads or big mobs, if you don't have enough health to draw from, you can always just make more. And it won't work as quick as a top tier rogue build, but with a little bit of active management, it'll easily get the job done. Overall, the all by myself build is going to come in at a 3 out of 5 because it's definitely not the most optimized and definitely isn't the easiest, but for a class that's basically built around giving you a ton of friends to play with, at least now you can say you beat the game solo and mean it. And the last build we are going to turn from a solid mid into a stellar Chad is for the rogue. Shying away from perfect assassinations and leading into the homicidal tendencies of a teenage psychopath, the Home Alone build will rely almost exclusively on traps to eliminate anything that might be after you. Starting with puncture to both slow and make vulnerable multiple enemies, we're going to tack on some additional assistance from a distance by using rapid fire as well. From there, the build really comes together with cold imbued caltrops and maxed out poison trap to knock down, freeze, and slow enemies in a world of pain. When paired with the vulnerabilities and crit potential of puncture and rapid fire, your enemies will find themselves in full wet bandit territory as trap after trap twist the knife of humiliation before you rain damage from afar. All you have to do is kite your enemies into a trap, sprinkle on some caltrops for a garnish, and tenderize before serving. And finally, to score this prepubescent Batman build, for fun factor, I'm going to give this a well-earned 4 out of 5. Of all the class builds I've outlined thus far, this is easily the most dynamic and rewarding build to play as designed, and its flexibility and coverage area allow for some creative approaches while still being consistent enough to wipe out large mobs. For ease of use, this build comes in a little harder to utilize, scoring only a 2 out of 5. In the same way that these variety of options and combos make it fun, that benefit becomes a drawback when you have to execute them almost perfectly for it to go smoothly. It's extremely cool and rewarding when it works, but just know that cooldowns can make it a little difficult to pull off consistently with mixed enemy types or when you're surrounded by big bads. And for effectiveness, Macaulay the Rogue covers the middle ground at a 3 out of 5 by being able to maintain safe distance, deal big damage to single targets or groups, and maintains the common rogue play of darting around the screen. All things being equal, I'm actually going to give the overall score a bump to 4 out of 5, as it's probably not the build for everyone and can be a little difficult to play, but the fun factor and versatility of this build gives it huge points that make it viable almost anywhere. And with that final tailspin into purposefully inefficient madness, hopefully you found a class you want to try, a playstyle you definitely want to avoid, or at least a little entertainment before your next trip into Sanctuary. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like in service to the algorithm gods, and make sure to subscribe for some cool and unusual Diablo content we're hoping to bring to the platform in the future. And until I see you next time, party on.